Hi everybody and welcome to Lost Genre Bridezillas, a place where we're going to take a look at different stories from brides and weddings, and we're going to start with one about a bride who tries to scam all of her bridesmaids. Several years ago, a friend of mine asked me to be a bridesmaid in her wedding. There were 6 of us plus the maid of honor, so 7 total. The bride had picked out her dress already, one for the maid of honor and one for the bridesmaids. The dress itself was lovely, but a bit expensive at $400 each since 2 of us were still in college and the rest had recently graduated. I was one of the 2 still in college, so money was super tight. Anyhow, the bride asked the maid of honor to coordinate with all of us for fittings and alterations and such as one of her duties. The maid of honor decided she would pay for all the dresses on her credit card because she wanted the air miles and we would pay her back directly. None of us minded, especially since she was going to let us pay her back in installments if we needed. I definitely needed. I wasn't able to go with everyone to pick up the dresses because finals week and planned to go by myself the following weekend. No big deal. The maid of honor said she would pay for mine on the group trip, but to call her if there were any issues with the dress itself and she would handle it. I get there and the dress fits perfectly. The shop owner scoots off while I'm changing back into my streets clothes since she has another client coming in, but confirms we're all set. As I'm walking out the door, another person working there yells out, "Hey, that'll be $200. I was stunned and totally mortified. I apologized and explained how I thought the maid of honor had paid for the dress the weekend before. The shop owner comes running over to defuse the situation and confirmed the dress was paid for already. I turned to walk out and suddenly realized she said $200 and not $400. Long story short, the dress was only $200. When I confronted the maid of honor about it, she spilled the beans. Apparently, the bride and maid of honor plotted together to charge us double to help pay for the bride's dress. I let the rest of the bridesmaids know and 4 of us dropped out of the wedding immediately. Whoa, what kind of a sucky person do you have to be to scam your friends, the people you chose as a bridesmaid, out of money just to pay for your wedding dress? That's just next level scummy. Oh man, that sucks. Anyways, that's not it for this story. There is a really great 10-year update, so let's continue with that. The wedding took place several years ago, almost a full 10 now, and I hadn't spoken to the bride and maid of honor since. The only other people I knew were the 3 other bridesmaids that dropped out with me. The 2 other bridesmaids were cousins of the bride, and they agreed to continue on as a favor to their mom, the bride's aunt, to avoid family drama. More on them in a bit. Fast forward to now. I got an email from the maid of honor who wanted to apologize again. She wasn't making excuses for her behavior. On the contrary, she acknowledged her wrongdoing and said she still felt incapable of saying no to the bride, her friend. She was pretty disgusted with herself and relieved when I confronted her. To her credit, she said as much back then. They'd been friends forever, and it took her a really long time to see behind the mask and how toxic the friendship had always been and the part she played in it. For what it's worth, I believe her. A quick flashback. I hadn't yet paid for the dress when the truth came out, so I just turned it over to the maid of honor. The 3 other bridesmaids got their money back immediately without any hassle. The maid of honor apologized like crazy at the time to all of us, but we just wrote her, the bride, and the whole situation off. None of us ever heard from the bride. No apologies, no nothing. Turns out, the bride never reimbursed the maid of honor for anything. Initially, the bride said she would repay her, but after the wedding, everything changed. She said if the maid of honor hadn't spilled the beans, she wouldn't be out all the money, and it's the price paid for being a disloyal friend. And the maid of honor wasn't just out the 200 times 6 bridesmaids' dresses. The bride had also convinced the maid of honor to charge the wedding dress because it would be easier for the bride to pay off the balance at the end. When the maid of honor threatened to take the bride to court, the bride said her cousins, the 2 bridesmaids, would say the maid of honor came up with the whole scheme and have her arrested for fraud. She found out years later the cousins never agreed to such a thing and would have been willing to go to court and say the exact opposite, They were disgusted by the whole situation too and wanted to drop out, but their mother, the bride's aunt, pushed them to keep appearances up for the family. They even told the maid of honor the replacement bridesmaids paid the bride $200 cash for each dress, none of which made it to the maid of honor. I almost forgot the funny part. The bride told her future husband the 4 of us dropped out because we were jealous of her. So her whole family, plus the maid of honor, knew the truth, but not the future husband or anyone in his family had any clue. And there was also much more behind the scenes the maid of honor was privy to that we didn't see and wouldn't anyway after we dropped out. Apparently, the bride manipulated her entire family into paying for most of the wedding and the honeymoon. The dresses were supposed to be her one and only responsibility, and likewise, the future husband was responsible for the suits. That's not what she had told us at the time, and even bragged her future husband was paying for everything. The bride also tried to manipulate her future in-laws into buying her a new car as a wedding present. They didn't, and in revenge, she interrupted the mother and son dance just moments after it started. Like, looked at the maid of honor and said, "Watch this," and then waltzed out onto the floor and basically shoved her new mother-in-law out of the way. She also accused the reception waitstaff of trying to ruin the photos by getting in the way of the photographer as they were serving the guests. Even after the photographer confirmed they were not in any of the shots, she still insisted they would have to personally reimburse her, even though she never paid for anything in the first place. Oh, it gets worse. At the brunch the morning after, the maid of honor said the bride gave a short toast to herself and didn't thank anyone and barely acknowledged her new husband. As for the maid of honor, she says she tried to collect the money she was owed but eventually accepted it was gone and cut off all ties. Even still, the bride would reach out every couple of months to ask if she was done being such a B yet. When the maid of honor blocked her number, the bride spread rumors about the maid of honor and her fiancé at the time, now husband, saying that he was illegal. Apologies, I loathe that word and people who use it. Marrying her only for the green card and claimed they used government assistance to pay for the wedding. Meanwhile, he already had become an American citizen long before they met and is a ridiculously successful software engineer who paid for the entire wedding himself and took not only his immediate family, but hers too, to Hawaii for the honeymoon. The bride was just jealous the maid of honor had everything she wanted. As for the bride, she's on divorce number 2 already and estranged from her entire family because they got tired of her manipulating and using them too. And that is the story of a horrible person. Wow! Trying to manipulate everyone, trying to get everybody to pay something to her, ruining the mother and son dance, not acknowledging her husband on her toast. I'm not a psych major or know much about psychology, but I would think this is some sort of a mixture between a narcissist and a psychopath. If there's anybody listening to this story that has knowledge on this thing, maybe they could help us out in the comment section to kind of understand what's going on in this bride's head. I mean, she has to have some serious issues, right? Or should we just chalk this one out to being a horrible human being? Wow. Okay, well, let's move on to the next story. I was a bartender for years, 14, at a private club that was a popular wedding venue and worked probably about 800 to 1,000 weddings in total. One stands out that I'll never forget. I was head bartender and manager on duty for most of them, and I worked with the in-house events coordinator, who handled all the logistics on our end prior to the event. Booking, catering, bar service, in-house decorations, etc. She typically gave me a heads up about guest requirements on my event sheet and let me know if the client was being a headache beforehand. For this case, we were doing a third marriage for the bride, in her mid-40s, and a first marriage for the groom. The events coordinator gave me a heads up that the bride was a serious bridezilla. She'd been emailing or calling about minor details 3 to 4 times a day for 3 months solid, and I was told to expect the worst. The day comes, and the bride and her party is there to oversee setup a few hours before the wedding. Not out of the ordinary, and everything is running smoothly until the flowers arrive. Floral is not our domain. They are arranged privately, and she freaks out because it's not exactly what she ordered. They're gorgeous, by the way, and way over the top for what I'd expect for a 250-person wedding. I have to calm her down and use my standard lines. No one is here to celebrate flowers, they're here to celebrate you, etc. We get over that, and I'm expecting the worst for the night, and it's lovely. She's radiant the whole evening. Everyone's happy, the event runs smoothly, and I'm stoked to not have to be dealing with drama. At the end, when they're packing up, I go to them to do my standard, "How did everything go? Is there anything I can assist you with?" conversation with her, while her hubby stands a few feet away talking to a friend. She turns to me with stars in her eyes and says, "It was perfect. I want to do my next one here." Hubby does a neck-snapping double take. I'm kind of speechless and manage to mumble out, "I'm glad you enjoyed it." They leave and I try to process what I just heard. Wait, it gets better. Often wedding parties show up the next day to pick up things they left behind so they don't have to spend an hour packing up late at night. When they do, we let them come down to the club bar for a drink if they want. They show up and come down to the bar where I'm working. At this point, I figure her "next one" comment was just a slip of the tongue. She'd had some wine, though wasn't what I'd call inebriated. But no, talking to her straight sober, with hubby in tow, she told me again how it was everything she'd hoped for and she'd definitely come back next time. That's when I realized she didn't want to get married, she just loved being a bride and having a special day all about her. Whoa, that's scary, I guess. A person who's getting married and divorced, and is up for her third wedding just because she likes being a bride and having a special day about her. I mean, honestly, if you're about all that stuff, then you could have a vow renewal ceremony every 5, 10, I don't know, whatever amount of years you want if you want a special day for you, or just celebrate your anniversary like super awesome, I don't know, getting married, divorcing, getting married, and and having that mindset of "I'll have my next one here." That's just scary and weird. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section. So before we move on to the last story, let's take a look at a really fun Facebook post. "Help! I need advice. My fiance and I are having lots of issues right now. We can't stop fighting and I don't know what to do. I quit my job because wedding planning was taking up so much time, and my fiance is refusing to get a second job. He doesn't understand that I don't have time to get ready for work, drive to work, be somewhere else all day, and drive home. I need to be home to plan this wedding. I'm trying to find a job from home, but it's difficult. I asked him to get a second job and he won't. It really pisses me off because we are spending $80,000 on this wedding and he keeps saying that we should spend less. Hello? No. This is my wedding I have been dreaming of since I was little, and I refuse to have anything but my dream wedding. How can I convince him to work a second job to pay for this? What happened to happy wife, happy life? What is wrong with this person? Hasn't she ever heard of wedding planners? I mean, she could easily, if she has a job, just pay for a wedding planner, give her all the instructions, and then just manage it through updates. That's what wedding planners do. That's their whole job. So she quits her job to plan the wedding and then wants her future husband to get a second one to pay for the wedding, a one-day party. Just because she's got this idea of a dream wedding. She's nuts. If I was the groom, this would be a huge red flag of a runaway man and save yourself. Wow. Okay, now let's move on to the last story, which isn't about a bridezilla. It's about a bridesmaidzilla, which I'm pretty sure when she was a bride was a total bridezilla. So here we go. My friend was getting married to the love of her life and had one of her best friends be a bridesmaid in the wedding. They had been best friends for 12 years and both of them were in my friends group, so I witnessed their relationship up close. The bridesmaid is a girl who we always say lives in her own head with no idea how the real world works. Very spoiled. At 32, she still lived at home and her parents paid all her bills. She then suggested they move out of the house so her and her boyfriend could live together in the nice house. Somehow they agreed, so they bought themselves a condo and continued to pay for their daughter to live in their house. She is still in school working on a degree that should have taken her 2 years, but she's on year 7 of it, constantly complaining about having group projects that don't go well, but it's always her partner's fault. Common denominator, baby. If every single person you've worked with has issues, it's most likely you're the one that's hard to work with. And knowing her, I can tell you that she is very hard to be around. Backstory aside, she's in the wedding. Leading up to the wedding, you could tell things weren't going well. I walked in on the bridesmaid cry screaming at the bride about how she was trying to do something nice for the bride. I immediately walked out because it was ugly. Bride insisted she didn't want to talk about the bridesmaid leading up to the wedding, but after the disastrous speech, she let it all out. One of the big issues was the plans to get ready for the day of the wedding. The bridesmaid suggested a makeup artist for the bride, who then hired that makeup artist and her assistants to do the bride, mother of the bride, maid of honor, and 3 bridesmaids the morning of the wedding. Bride said the makeup artist would do her mother and maid of honor, and the assistant would do the 3 bridesmaids. The bridesmaid then threw a fit because it was her makeup artist, so there was no way the assistant would be doing her. She needed to be done by the main artist and she should go first. Bride tries to explain that it was most important to do herself, her mother, and maid of honor. Drama ensues. The bride sits her down and tries to explain that her wedding day is about her. Every one other day of their friendship is always about the bridesmaid, so she really needed to let her wedding day be about her. The message didn't really get through. Leading up to the wedding, the bridesmaid was insistent on doing a speech. The groom told the bride multiple times to just say no because he knew it wouldn't go well. But the bride caved because there was no saying no to the bridesmaid. Smart man he is. Speech time comes along and it was a train wreck. The bridesmaid leads off with how they've been friends for 12 years, but it would have been longer. She had wanted to be friends with the bride long before that, but the bride was mean to her and would make fun of her with her other friends. She then said she knew they had to be friends when one day she asked the bride if her pants made her look fat, and the bride said yes. She knew that honesty was something she needed in life. Cue everyone wide-eyed and staring in disbelief that she just painted the bride to be a huge bee. Bridesmaid goes on to talk about the 2 times her own boyfriend tried to break up with her. Those stories has nothing to do with the bride. She never even mentioned the bride. To top it off, her boyfriend was at the wedding, now totally red in the face. Spoiler alert, they're still together and married. Unbelievable. The speech wrapped up with a well wish to the couple. She never turned any of her stories around to say anything nice about the bride. Just crap on her in the first story and then talked about herself for the rest. Our entire table was sitting there in shock, trying to discreetly yell at her to stop talking and to sit down. It was hilarious but painful to watch. The next day, their friendship ended. Not because of the awful speech, not because the bride was hurt by the speech and her behavior leading up to the wedding, but because the bridesmaid was upset that the bride didn't like the speech. She genuinely thought she made a good, thoughtful speech and the bride should have loved it. The bride told her honestly that it was rude and in poor taste and was all about the bridesmaid. I guess she didn't appreciate her honesty after all, because the bridesmaid couldn't forgive her for not liking that speech, and that was the end of their friendship. Oh, wow, that poor bride needs a do-over wedding without that horrible bridesmaid. That is an example of somebody who's lived her whole life in a bubble and nobody has ever said no to her for anything. Somebody who's been spoiled since they were a baby. I mean, honestly, the parents actually agreeing to leave their own house to her daughter and her boyfriend, keep paying for the bills, and buy a condo to move away. That's too much. You should not burden the world with these kinds of people. It's ridiculous. Alright, well, we've reached the end of the video. I really hope you liked it, and if you did, go ahead and click like. If you still haven't subscribed, go ahead and click subscribe and become part of this community. I really hope you enjoy the channel and stick around, and I'll see you guys on the next video.